I'm sure there have been people who have missed out on opportunities or messed up their lives because they didn't see the writing on the wall and didn't pivot. But I think there's probably a lot more people who messed up their lives or missed out on opportunities because they were constantly getting scared of the next big thing and constantly jumping and pivoting. And I just had the feeling with AI, I'm like, you know what? Let's stay the course. Let's keep improving as an engineer. Like, I think this is all going to work out. Hey there, welcome to Book Overflow. This is the podcast for software engineers by software engineers, where every week we read one of the best technical books in the world in an effort to improve our craft. I am Carter Morgan, and I'm joined here, as always, by my co-host, Nathan Toups. How are you doing, Nathan?
Doing great. Hey, everybody.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. As always, like, comment, subscribe if you're on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review if you're on an audio platform. And really take a minute to do that if you're a frequent listener of the podcast. I was listening to one of my favorite college football podcast the other day, and I make sure to always tune into this thing, and the host was like, hey, just take a minute to give a 5-star review if you haven't. And I was like, I consider myself a huge fan of this, but I haven't done that yet. So if you find yourself in a similar position with Book Overflow, make sure to do that. You always book time with us on Leland if you want to get to know us a little further, get some help with your career. And we've also got some other requests for you guys, or I guess some other things to advertise, which first is our interview with Patrick Dubois, which is live right now by the time we release this recording. How cool was that, Nathan? I mean, Patrick
so
Dubois
much fun.
is, one of the co-authors of the DevOps Handbook and the inventor of the term DevOps.
Created the term for DevOps Days. He was the creator of the first DevOps Days conference. So pretty awesome. Really cool interview, and hope you enjoy it. We've got more in the pipeline. We're not going to talk about it yet, but yes. Pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, some names we're very excited about, and I think I've teased this one before, but should it go through, and there's no reason it shouldn't, one of the names we have is one of the ones I've been most excited about in all Book Overflow.
Actually, it'll be our second New York Times bestseller on the podcast. So
who's the first?
Jason Fried with Rework made it to the. I was actually looking like which of these actually were chart toppers, and obviously they're going to be more in like the business type books because they have a broader audience. But
right.
Pretty cool. I mean, now I can be like, I've talked to a New York Times bestselling author. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I've been really happy with the interview haul we get on this podcast, and with how much street cred I get at work with it. Like if you had told me when we started this podcast, like, oh yeah, you'll interview the guy who invented DevOps. What are you talking about? So
and if you want to be a real jerk, be like, well, I was talking to this guy the other day. I wasn't. I was interviewing him for his wonderful book. Don't do that. Don't be that guy.
Yeah. Oh, if you're help me out with a competition at work. We're doing a LinkedIn impressions competition. So if you want, I'm trying to post more on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. If you search Carter Morgan Book Overflow, you'll find me. Follow me, or if you want to connect, just I try to accept people's connections if they say that they're from the podcast. If you write, hey, fan of the podcast, I'll accept your connection usually. But yeah, so help me out and give me some impressions of my posts, guys. And another thing we might need some help with, if you consider yourself kind of a Book Overflow super fan, I'm going to say by that metric, you have listened to all or most of the discussion episodes, and you would like to appear on the podcast in a somewhat limited capacity, please message us at contact@bookoverflow.io. Like we talked about, we try to do at the end of the year some special episodes, some ones that aren't discussions or interviews, kind of more like game formats. We're working on a format right now, but it would require a tiebreaker vote. And it's going to involve discussing pretty much every book we've read. And so if you're someone who feels like you have listened to all the episodes and have enough opinions about the books we've covered, even if you haven't read the books, let us know, because we could use your help. So again, just contact@bookoverflow.io. And with that, go ahead.
Well, one last announcement. Speaking of super fans, we're starting to quietly talk about maybe starting a Discord for this. We're not making any promises yet, but if you're interested, please give us a shout out. Either shoot us an email or put a comment in this episode, because we do want a space for to start building a community. I think our subscriber count is to the point that we can justify it, and I think coordinating like this, like finding super fans to do special episodes and stuff like that, will be easier if we do that. Anyway, if that sounds interesting to you, if you'd want to participate, just let us know.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'd love to be able to grow the community a bit more. And if there's demand for it, that's something we want to do. Well, let's talk about the book this week. We've got a hot topic this week, Beyond Vibe Coding, From Coder to AI Era Developer. We read the first half this week. This is by Addy Osmani. Quick introduction on Addy Osmani. Addy Osmani is a senior engineering leader at Google, where he works on developer experience, performance, and AI-powered software development tools. He has 25 years of industry experience building web technologies and has authored multiple books on software engineering best practices. And the book introduction is AI is transforming software development, shifting programmers from writing code to collaborating with AI in an intent-driven workflow. Vibe coding, a prompt-first exploratory approach where you describe what you want in natural language and let a large language model fill in the blanks, represents a radical shift in the developer's role from writing code to directing it. However, vibe coding comes with a serious caveat. Like a high-speed exploratory vehicle, it can take you off the beaten path quickly. Beyond vibe coding, From Coder to AI Era Developer, explores how AI-powered coding assistants like GitHub Copilot and OpenAI Codex are reshaping the way we build software, from automating routine coding tasks to influencing architecture and design decisions. So, yeah, I mean, this is the biggest thing happening in our industry right now. We're excited to find, it's kind of one of the hard things about doing a podcast where you cover books is sometimes you can't talk about the hot topic because there's not a book about it, because obviously it's the hot topic. But hey, someone wrote a book about it. So we thought, let's give this a go. We've seen some positive buzz about it. So about halfway through it now. And yeah, I mean, Nathan, give us your thoughts on the first half of this book.
Yeah, this is a wonderful book. This isn't a criticism of the book, but I was just like looking. This book was pretty expensive to purchase, and I was like, "Is this book just priced insane?" And I was like, "No, all new O'Reilly and Manning books are priced in this category. They're like pushing above $60.
Yeah.
For even for like the Kindle stuff, I think it was like $50 or something, and we would maybe love to get O'Reilly or Manning as a sponsor in the future. That'd be really cool because we pay for these out of pocket. These are funded by us. And but yeah, this book I thought did a fantastic job of crystallizing a lot of wisdom that's starting to spread through social media and blog posts that you're seeing. A very clear and cohesive argument as to like proper use and even ways to explore these tools. And I thought it gave you a good breakdown of like, you're trying to do this thing, so here's a way you can engage with it, or you're running into these troubles, and so you can do this. It can get repetitive in the book if you read it cover to cover like we do, but I think that if you skipped around and just wanted to read a specific chapter, the repetition is justified, meaning I could go right to a problem I'm trying to solve, and he kind of gives you the context that you need. So yeah, great book. What are your opinions on it?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I think this book has the same problem that we've noticed with a lot of tech books, and like Manning and O'Reilly books, really, were like, I don't know if this is something that like Manning or O'Reilly dictates, but they kind of like have to start out assuming that you know nothing about the subject. Like you haven't even heard of AI, or you've maybe passively heard of vibe coding. And you're like, I know, I'll read this entire book to understand everything. And I kind of wish that, like we talked about, like open telemetry, the open telemetry book having that problem. I kind of wish they'd start off assuming that we know a little bit more about the subject. I'll say that this test passes the Book Overflow format test, or this book passes the Book Overflow format test with flying colors, which is how enjoyable is this book to read cover to cover? Usually me lying in my bed with my Kindle, right? And it's a very enjoyable read, very well written. Which I always find very impressive from especially someone like Addy, who is an engineering leader and not necessarily a professional author. So yeah, very talented. And yeah, I think you said it really well, Nathan, where it's just starting to crystallize a lot of the knowledge that's out there about vibe coding and prompting and best practices. And I just try to think like, who would this book be most helpful to? And we're going to talk about that later. But like a lot of what I'm reading, I've kind of heard because I'm like on Twitter too much and on LinkedIn too much. But would someone who's maybe not as locked into this and is just kind of hearing a little bit like, I'm hearing about vibe coding, but I don't know what that is or how to do it. Like maybe they'd really benefit from this book. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, I also just as a side note, I really hope we can get Addy on
Oh yeah.
He's very charismatic, has really great video presence. His actually, I would highly recommend, even if you're still on the fence about the book after this podcast episode, he's got so much content online, and he even talks about like why we should go beyond prompt engineering and get into what he calls context engineering and some other stuff that is highly recommended. Like it's just really good short form content that he has as well. And so I think there's a lot of value there. Again, he puts this in book form in a way that you can really kind of like think about the topics a bit more. And I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was going to be pretty good, but I was pleasantly surprised at how much I got out of this as someone who has actually taken a pretty aggressive approach to incorporating a lot of these ideas into my work.
Right.
So I
Right.
thought maybe it was going to be like, oh yeah, I mean, it'll be good for the podcast, but I'm not really sure how much I'm going to get out of this. And I got a lot out of it actually. So
Yeah,
that was
I would
pretty cool.
agree. I think well maybe we kind of just start talking about the book, or I guess the kind of the topic around the book. So AI, um, we are now, when did ChatGPT release? I think that was 2022. So we're
Yeah.
about 3.5 years into AI.
Feels
I'm
longer than that and shorter at the
I
same
would
time.
agree. Yes. Well, okay, so let's start with our general thoughts on AI, right? Some people are really, really interested in it. Some people aren't really interested in it. I mean, well, Nathan, 3.5 years into this, you as a professional software engineer, how you feel about all this?
I'm like a Saul to Paul conversion on this. I was very anti I was very anti AI tools. I thought the early versions of it were horrible. It was the kind of people that were like talking about it reminded me of the like pickup artist kind of folks online.
Right, right.
I still think that there's that problem in the vibe coding AI stuff where they're and the cool thing is the book talks about this, right? Which is this idea that you can get to these like 80% prototype kind of work. Unfortunately, most of the stuff people show off are their like vibe coded 80% prototypes. And of course, the real software engineering is in that last 30% or last 20% of work
Right.
that we have here. And that's where all the problems come up. And so, again, this book's about beyond vibe coding. And I think that's any of us who kind of went from super anti, I feel for you. Like, if I read a post on Hacker News or on Lobsters about why this is ruining the industry and why you don't like coding anymore, I'll typically come away reading those blog posts and go, you know what? These are all valid points. Like I can imagine environments in which a CEO comes in and says everyone must use these tools and
Right,
doesn't have any
right.
support. I also think that there's a type of programmer who likes doing what a lot of other people would consider grunt work, and
Yes.
you're taking that away. And for me, for instance, like, and again, we'll talk about why ways that you can have a relationship with these tools. It's really positive and why you get excited about it. And that's the kind of conversion that I've had is that as the tools have gotten better and as I've realized what relationship I want with these AI tools, I'm really in the AI augmented camp. I'm like anti vibe coding and in the AI augmented camp. If we're gonna talk about this, and the
Right.
book again dives into it, because I'm doing software architecture. I'm doing Staff Plus work,
Yes.
and he talks about the responsibilities that you have to take and all these other things. But that's where I've actually very impressed with certain types of tasks that these AI tools can help us with. I've absolutely seen if you want to quickly prototype, if you want to understand and do research, if you want to do these other things personally, both in like little weird projects that I've been working on the side and even at work, these augmentations have been really amazing. And at the same time, and again, I want to get your opinion on this. I am also worried about skill atrophy. I think that's the biggest
Right.
thing that like I
Right.
worry about. And I think that if you use these tools improperly, it is a real risk. And luckily, the book addresses that too, even just halfway in.
Yeah. 3.5 years in, I am ready to, in the war of AI versus software engineers, I'm ready to declare victory for the software engineers.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Right. And I don't think there is a war anymore. I think so AI has obviously drastically changed how we operate in a day-to-day as software engineers. But I think when it first came out, I remember first using ChatGPT for a school assignment, and to the point as for my master's degree. To and it was the ChatGPT was so new that like Georgia Tech wasn't even telling us we couldn't use it because like no one even understood it. And I remember I was writing kind of like low level C code and having to do like stuff like semaphores. And I like asked AI and ChatGPT for help with it. And this has to be like ChatGPT 3, like maybe ChatGPT 2. And I remember being stunned that it generated mostly working code. I was like, what the heck is this? Because for our entire lives, for all of coding history, like that's been what sets us apart as engineers, as I can read and write code, right? That's like kind of the mysterious skill that your friends and family are like, what is code? How does code work? Like, and so to come face to face with a robot who can generate code and understand code was shocking. And I think that obviously put the fear of God into a lot of software engineers of kind of like, well, wait a minute, is our field going to exist in a few years? We're a couple years in now, and I don't know. I feel pretty confident in saying that software engineers are here to stay. And I think I
Yeah.
voiced this on the podcast maybe a year or so ago where I said, like, I'm sure there have been people who have missed out on opportunities or messed up their lives because they didn't see the writing on the wall and didn't pivot. But I think
Right.
there's probably a lot more people who messed up their lives or missed out on opportunities because they were constantly getting scared of the next big thing and constantly jumping and pivoting. And I just had the feeling with AI, I'm like, you know what? Let's stay the course. Let's keep improving as an engineer. Like, I think this is all going to work out. And I always told myself, like, and if it doesn't work out, then I guess I'll go into tech sales. Like, I don't know. And in which case, this will all be good experience. And
But
so, yeah, go ahead.
no. That I'm in this. I'm in complete agreement. I think that
Right.
what's going to happen is this is my prediction. I don't make a lot of predictions, but companies that figure out how to crack the code on AI augmentation are going to run circles
Yes.
around companies that double down on replacing engineers. So
Yeah.
I do think that what unfortunately and where we're skewing right now, and I think there's a few posts about this, it's a rough time to be a junior engineer. I think that that's short-sighted, but true in that these companies aren't realizing that there's a pipeline and that
Right.
eventually senior engineers are going to go away because we're going to get old. And that is hard to think about, but it's a 15 years, 20 years problem, for those of us who are mid-career. But it's going to be a big deal. And I do think that companies who figure out how to get recent college grads to use AI to strengthen them faster, not to replace skills. And again, this book addresses this. This is what I'm like so
Right.
excited about is like what your relationship with these AI tools should be at different phases of your career. Um, that's the social norms we haven't figured out completely, but you already can see the shape of it. Um, and if the idea is so that you don't do any work, you're missing the point, right? If it's so that you can, uh, do superhuman things that you couldn't do before, and I think this is the same thing of like, let's say you're a construction worker and you were very skilled at using a shovel, and what you used to do is to have like 7, 8, 9 folks shoveling,
Right.
to dig something out or flatten something or work as a group, and then they invent an earth mover, right? They invent the bulldozer, they invent
Right.
all these different types of tools, and one person can do the work of 20 people, right?
Hmm.
And it's a new skill set. Now, here's the deal: his muscles are probably going to atrophy when it comes to like raw skill in using a
Right.
shovel, but his muscles and the ability to use a new tool to do something that humans couldn't do before is completely different. Now, you may say, I actually love my relationship with a shovel and I really like custom, I'm going to do artisanal shovel work, right? And you
Right.
can do that. But most people just want an earth mover to like get their, foundation ready so they can build a building. And I think that that's actually not pushing this analogy too far. I think this is literally where we are right now, which is
Right.
that um, companies may hire fewer people to do more amazing things. And that doesn't mean that there's going to now be fewer companies. I think that what it actually means is there's going to be more companies doing highly specialized things. And if you look at it this way, of like, hey, if I learn these cool tool sets, I mean, honestly, if I was going to go into construction, would I rather learn how to use a bulldozer and be a skilled bulldozer operator or use a shovel, right? And I think that's really where we are. Um,
And I even so two thoughts on the people hiring fewer people and junior engineers. I guess I'll go with junior engineers first. And I voiced this before where like I think I think companies who think I won't hire a junior engineer because I can just have AI do that are totally missing the point. And I can only speak towards my experience. And at my company, we've been very fortunate to find what I would honestly go to bat and say are probably the best eight, or at least in the 99th percentile developers in Utah Valley. I've been incredibly impressed with my team. And our three junior engineers. And so again, I look at them and see the way they use AI. And like, I just remember my first job out of college, like I remember having to migrate a component from like Angular JS to like Angular version 2 or whatever. And it was like my first assignment out of school. And I just straight up had to go to my manager and say, like, I can't do this. Like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what this is. And they just had to take it away from me. I would never say that with AI, and our juniors have never said that. A junior engineer has never had to pull me over and be like, Carter, it doesn't work. Like, I can't figure out what's wrong, right? Like, they're just using AI to help unblock themselves. I find their code is of higher quality than what I think a junior engineer pre AI would do. I don't know. I find them incredibly effective, and to the point that when we talk about expanding and hiring more engineers, we're talking a lot about hiring more junior engineers, because we as senior engineers and lead engineers are too hung up doing kind of more of the grunt work tasks. And that even factors in that AI accomplishes a lot of that grunt work for you. We'd like to focus on higher level stuff with the juniors focusing on more of that. So I think AI makes the proposition of hiring a junior engineer much more impressive, or much more valuable.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about like, well, people are going to hire fewer people, that's something I also don't know. Like when I think about like at my company, how much output we're doing and how much faster would we be or how much slower would we be if we didn't have AI, right? And I don't know, I hesitate to say anything more than we would be 50% slower. I just think that there's a lot of other work that goes into software engineering. There's the coordinating, there's the planning, there's the teamwork, there's the pull request reviews, you know. So I don't know. I'm hesitant to say that we'd be anything but 50% slower. And I also think I don't think we would have a bigger team if there wasn't AI. At a certain point, the budget is capped. I think we would just be building less stuff. There's already a backlog the size of a mountain at the company, right? AI helps us get through it faster, but I don't think we would look at that backlog size and say we need more engineers to get through this faster. I think we would just make peace with not building as much stuff as we wanted to.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think it will. I mean, it will impact decision making. Like, for instance, if y'all did another round of funding,
right?
What the headcount would need in your minds to accomplish what is there? I think obviously there's budgetary constraint, but I think it also impacts, like, yeah, again, the type of engineer you hire, how you hire, right? Because now that we're in this age of AI, like, if you take a very AI aggressive approach, I would imagine their AI usage hygiene. How do they get out of sticky situations? Are they vibing, or are they doing AI augmentation? That should probably be part of the hiring process as well, right?
Right.
So I do think it impacts it. But I think things are just going to change in the same way. Again, in the same way that, like, you know, people used to use horses and now they use cars, or if they're in a city, they use mass transit. Like the way that we do the calculus of solving problems. And again, at the end of the day, if you're in a high growth company, you're probably just going to continue to focus on high growth. And what AI does is allow you just to move faster, like you're talking about, right? Like, it wouldn't maybe change the hiring amount, but it's just like, how much can we take on, logistically, which is interesting. One thing that I wanted to bring up, and he brings it up early in the book, he kind of defines vibe coding versus assisted engineering.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think this is important because vibe coding has a bad rep, and I think honestly, vibe coding deserves the bad rep that it has, because
I would agree.
I think we've all seen this. I think we've also just experimented with it. People are like, "Oh yeah, I can build an app that I'm making $10,000 a month as a side hustle, in 3 days." And you're like, when you actually look into the details, they had a really amazing product idea in a very basic onboarding flow, and like wired up a couple APIs. Like, it was clever, right? It was the same kind of clever business models. But these people are making claims like, 10x engineers are becoming 100x engineers. And this drives me, I hate this. This is like such a nasty thing. And I think it was Prime Eigen that like talks about this. And he's like, do the math. You're saying that if you're a 100x engineer, you can do in 4 days what another competent engineer, because we're not talking about like average person. We're talking about you are 100x versus a competent engineer. You can do in 4 days what would take them an entire calendar year.
Right. It's like, come on.
No, you're not. You're not doing that. No one is doing that. And that is a completely absurd claim to make. And so I think if people talk like that, it just undermines all of the legitimate utility, the legitimately amazing things that these tools can do.
Yeah. And so, he talks about kind of vibe coding. Like vibe coding is very good for like kind of greenfield. You're very open to what the AI does. You have a general idea and you just kind of prompt the app into existence. But he mentions in the book over and over again, it gets you about 70% of the way there. Then the last 30% takes over. And that's where vibe coding sort of fails. And so again, he compares that to AI assisted engineering, which really AI assisted engineering, nothing's changed about what it means to be a software engineer. It's just how do you use AI to do it? And I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but I had a buddy who non-technical runs a marketing agency. He wanted, he had a customer who wanted to like him to build a website. And my buddy was like, hey, I've got Cursor, like I'll build that website for you. And he just coded himself into a corner. And eventually he said, he's like, Carter, I will pay you $200 if you come and fix this bug. And like, it took me 10 minutes. And I also looked at the website he built and it was insane. It was like a Python server that was serving up like Jinja templates for like to do like the HTML. I was like, I don't think I've ever seen this before. Wow. And so, yeah, it's so
go
ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I didn't want to interrupt.
No, I was just going to say, like, I don't think our jobs are, I don't think we're losing our jobs anytime soon because I witnessed live that kind of like the 30%. And I also, when I was experimenting with a startup idea, it was really nice because AI, really helped me. I was making a React native app, which I'd never done before. And it was wonderful and kind of like spinning things up quickly. And then I noticed that too. Like I would kind of like, I would put off like the purposely hard parts and be like, okay, I know that we're going to, eventually we're going to have like an actual API that provides all this information. But for now, like, let's just have a JSON file and as a stub. And then like, and like it was doing a great job. And then it got to the time where I was like, okay, now actually make the API. Okay, now actually make the user authentication system. Now actually do this and that. So like you get to that 30%. And that's where the vibe coding falls off a cliff. And it's like, okay, back to the real deal engineering.
I think I'm gonna write a blog post about this. Have you heard of something called Gelman amnesia?
I haven't actually.
Okay. You'll go. I think you and the listeners will like this. So Gelman amnesia is the pattern in which this came back from like newspapers, and I noticed this because I lived in a small town, and every once in a while, like if we did a theater production or something, they write something about us or something we were doing. It's a pattern where you read a newspaper article and about something well, and maybe it's in your field, it's in your town, whatever. And you just notice multiple errors. You just notice there's just like nothing crazy, misspelled my middle name, or oh, actually it was Thursday, it wasn't Friday, or is it oh man, no, I didn't get in an argument with so and so. Actually, we're best friends. They'll miss some details, and you're like, huh, that's weird. They just messed that up a little bit. But when you read another article about something you're not as aware of, you're just like, you kind of take it as an authority, right? And you're like, oh, the newspaper is very reliable. Oh, they covered that story, I think this is we're dealing with Gelman amnesia in our, like, you put something into the AI models that you're a deep expert in. And you're going to be like, that was kind of right. I mean, I can see how somebody would run with this. I wouldn't do it that way. It's the wrong templating tool, or actually nobody uses that library anymore, right? But then you do something you're not as aware of. Make an embedded C program for my ESP32 to automate my refrigerator temperature monitoring or something. Like, I'll be like, oh wow, this is so cool. I never would have done this, and like I'll take the code and run with it. I think that we're dealing with Gelman amnesia, right? So that's that exact thing where somebody who's product focused and is like, oh man, I spun up this vibe coded thing in a weekend, and I'm like, I can promise you the auth on your app is wrong, right? I can promise you that if anyone actually cared about your app, you'd get owned in like 2 seconds because you don't know what you're doing. And it's actually really hard, right? And unless you said, please use the Clerk API
Right.
in components to do this, like you did it wrong. And so I think this is where we are with these AI tools, where again, it's like if you are an expert in something, you're like, oh man, this thing gets wrong all the time. And I think any criticism of these AI tools, that's exactly what it is. Like I've worked in this industry. Telltale sign and Go, perfect example. We use this thing called the empty interface. It's kind of frowned upon, but you need it sometimes, or it's kind of like an interface that takes no methods. And it's kind of long. It just says interface with some curly brackets. But no one uses that as a way to pass in arguments or to return arguments anymore. You use the any word because any is just an alias for empty interface. Well, all modern Go uses any. But most of the recommendations from the large language models were trained on Go code that's been around for the last, 10, 15 years. And so they will put empty interfaces everywhere. And so it's just kind of one of those things where like if I see a junior dev give me some Go code and they're passing empty interfaces around, I'm like, you're out of your depth. You don't quite understand. Probably. I mean, maybe they hate Annie or something and they have a reason about it. But again, that's just like one little example that is like a pet peeve of mine where I'm like, okay, I know where this came from. Now my hair's on the back of my neck and I have to like be super diligent about the rest of the code review because I'm just like, what's the quality of in here? Are these design decisions that they made, or is this something that they just kind of let happen? And so I think that you should pay attention to that. And I think the book talks about this. This is like the whole point of getting into assisted engineering. And again, where I was really impressed, he sets this from the very beginning of the book, sets it really clearly.
Yeah, I'm trying to find his exact words. When you're talking about the remaining 30%, he says, the remaining 30% of software engineering, the hard parts still requires skills that only trained, thoughtful developers can bring.
Yeah.
And I just really believe that. We talked about it just a bit, but kind of like, I think there are people that have just really, really enjoy like the physical act of writing code or like the mental act of like cranking out boilerplate. Like that feels really satisfying to them. And I feel for those people in this new age. I have never been that kind of person. I have always found code to be a means to an end. Like I got into software engineering because like fundamentally I found the power to create to be very enticing. I liked the idea that if I had an idea, I could, will it into reality. And I've liked as a profession, I see a lot of people at work, and I'm very impressed with all of my coworkers. But I look at some of the jobs that some of them are doing, which are very kind of like context specific for our current company. And if they were to leave and go to a new company, they're going to have to kind of do a lot of explaining in interviews about like why what they were doing here applies there. And I've said it before, but I just feel like in almost every other reality, I'm a professional talker for my job. And like the world needs talkers, but I really enjoy that I have this hard skill set that I can kind of just tell people like, this is what makes me valuable. I can build. I can build something that other people can't. And so AI has been a welcome development for me because I really enjoy kind of that higher order thinking that comes with software engineering. And cranking out boilerplate has never been something I've found incredibly fulfilling. And when you get to some of those kind of higher order tasks, and I'm trying to see, because when talking about that, he says the best engineers have always been more than just coders. They've been problem solvers who understand both technical constraints and human needs. Because sometimes I'll talk to people kind of outside the field, or especially like it's funny, like I did an event at my my alma mater, BYU, where I was speaking to some students. And sometimes students will look at me when I say, like, I really don't think that AI is here to take our jobs. And sometimes people like outside the field or students especially will look at me like, oh, bless your heart. Like you're out of touch, old man. You don't realize what's coming. And I don't know how else to say, but like, I'm telling you the stuff I do every day, I do not see a path right now for AI to take it away from me. Like when I migrated all of our systems from Azure to AWS, I don't see a future where AI is handling that no problem, right? And then we talk about like technical constraints and like, for example, we are working on a feature for Leland Plus, our content library. We're trying to create kind of like focused AI modules for subscribers. So the idea being that like if you want someone, you are preparing to apply to Harvard, and you know that Harvard has specific kind of like essay formats, right? We at Leland know all the things that make a good Harvard essay. And so we are loading up an AI agent with all that context specifically. So it understands that it is here to review a Harvard essay and has all of the context from all the insights we've gathered from our clients and our coaches about what makes a good Harvard essay. So you can insert your Harvard essay into it and it'll kind of automatically evaluate it, right? Something that just gives you a bit more of a custom focus than like you might get out of vanilla ChatGPT. We're trying to do like all the hard work of constructing the prompt basically and using that domain expertise for you. Anyhow,
Question for you.
Go for it. Yeah.
What have y'all picked a tool to do like evaluation quality and stuff, or is that something?
No, we're very early in it, but we are very
So
aware.
I'll do a shout out to a former.
Yeah.
So I used to work at a company called Impera. They got acquired by Figma. Their leadership,
Nice.
Ankur, he's an amazing software engineer. Did amazing stuff. He has a new startup called BrainTrust.dev. And that's literally what they do is like for companies that are doing custom evaluation. And it's actually like a hard problem. And a bunch of these companies, because like you have to write these custom prompts that kind of embed themselves inside of the prompt that the end user is giving. And then you need to measure of like, well, is the output meeting expectations? Like, is it the right tone? Is it the right content? Is it doing these things? And so it's kind of cool. They use, this is like a whole new thing. They're called judges, and you actually use large language models to be judges of the output of the evaluations. And so like the whole world of LLM ops and all these other things, it's nuts. And so even if you don't use BrainTrust, they publish a bunch of really good stuff on like the patterns of like how to use it. And anyway, I'm just giving a shout out because I'm not getting paid by them or anything. I'm just a fanboy because I think that the way that they're doing stuff is like really cool. And it's a non-trivial problem because you're like, how do you consistently do regression testing on something that's non-deterministic, right? Like these are hard questions to ask where you're like, if I send the same things in 50 times and the outputs are somewhat random, they can have a set of variants. What's the distribution upon which they're perfect answers, they're pretty good answers, or they're absolutely horrible and our customer will hate it answers? And it's like measuring that's hard. It's like non-trivial.
As a side note, when I think about kind of like the AI era and like what I should have done differently in my career, like if I really wanted to hop on this wave, I think that's the focus where I wish I had tried to like make a bigger swing was like LLM ops and like LLM evaluations. Like I think that's a really, really interesting thing. Like I don't really want to go build like AI tools for dentists, right? Like that just doesn't really call to me. But when I hear about people doing like that kind of stuff, I'm like, oh, that sounds really neat. But anyway, so we're doing this AI module stuff. So all that to say that basically we have a usage limit for users. So they're not just using us as their ChatGPT subscription, right? And then what we need is when you hit that usage limit to lock it down, right? And so we have kind of two approaches. One is when you're engaged in an active conversation. If we get a 429 error back, we lock it down and say, hey, too many requests for the day. But the other is when you actually click into a module for the first time, we need to evaluate if you've hit that usage limit and then not even let you start the module. And so we have a query set up that, determines if you've reached that. But in Next.js, right, what was happening was I didn't vibe code this, but I kind of had spec'd it out and said, okay, this is what I need. And I tell Claude Code and say, okay, and this is what Claude is great at. I pasted in the new syntax, right, the GraphQL, the updated GraphQL query. And I said, okay, we have this field. Go ahead and update all of our GraphQL queries in here and do the logic and basically make it so that the module doesn't start up if you get that. And said, great. But the problem with how Claude implemented was it did it client side. And so what was happening is it was kind of waiting. And so like it would render it with the start button. And then while it was going to retrieve like, hey, have they hit that usage limit? We were getting layout shift. And then it was locking the user out. And so as an engineer, I can kind of look at that and be like, wait, that's not good. Like, I don't like that. And so the option one would be to do like kind of like wrap it as a suspend and say, don't render anything until we get this query back. But the better option that we like, at least on our team, was to do it server side. We said, actually fetch this server side, fetch the information server side. And then on first render, we know what button to render. But I had to tell Claude and say like, no, like you did it wrong. You can't do it client side. You got to do it server side. So why don't you do it server side? And there'll be a bit of prop drilling, but that's fine. And I think that's an example of like kind of knowing like, okay, what are the technical limitations? Knowing as a team, like we as a team try to default to server side as much as we possibly can. And so I have that context that an AI agent just doesn't. And I have the good technical judgment to know, hey, we're getting layout shift that's going to ding us on our Google scores. It's not a good user experience. We got to make sure we don't render until we get this. And the best way to do that is just going to be able to do it server side. And so, yeah, I just think that's an example to me of like where does that technical know-how come into, and why I don't see this completely replacing us anytime soon, because it just requires a lot of outside context that's hard for an agent to understand at all times, you know?
Yeah, I think that one of the quotes that I had was the more powerful our AI tools become, the more critical it is that we maintain our expertise. And only through deep understanding of software principles are we able to ensure that remarkable tools enhance our capabilities rather than erode them. And he actually elaborates this in the book, which is that the biggest group benefiting from these AI tools are the most advanced software engineers. So,
Absolutely.
I'm in the same boat. Is that like I have an aesthetic that I've earned over the years of like, I've like gathered over the years of like what good code functions like how do high performance systems behave. And what I've actually found, I'm a big fan of using this both for like for prototyping and for research. So a lot of
Yeah,
times
oh yeah.
I'll use large language models to help me prototype an idea quickly, which I know is throwaway code. And if you get back, and what's funny is you read through this book, every piece of advice in here on like how to properly engage with large language models applies to how to engage with your team, right? If you
Yeah.
really do think of this as like the junior engineers on my team are confused by the request that I gave them, like you probably gave them a bad request, like you probably weren't clear and you were kind of fuzzy and you didn't, so the same kind of care and attention that you have to making sure that you don't give too little context, you don't give too much context, you make sure that focus, you set expectations on what the output should be, you set clear criteria on what the behavior of this thing should be. That's exactly what you should have in like a good ticket. And I think again, when people complain about large language models, they're like, "Oh, they've tricked us into having to write really elaborate Jira tickets as
Right.
a living." And I'm like, but at the same time, if you're working with a team of folks, you actually need to do that. Like spending a little bit of time really understanding the scope of work and understanding these other pieces is actually pretty important if you want to delegate.
I
If you're
pride myself on writing a good ticket.
Well, see, yeah, exactly. Well, I think this is one of the reasons why like it's been such a good thing for you, because like you are that sort of intersection between people and the
Right.
machinery. Like you're a deep expert in machinery, but you don't feel the necessary to be like turning the wrench, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so I think that makes a lot. And so one of the things that he talks about practical workflow patterns, and I think I like this. He kind of comes back to it several times. Is AI as a first drafter, AI as a pair programmer, and AI as a validator. And again, these are three patterns that I was like, yeah, these are the ones that I've kind of found myself as well.
Right. Right.
And what's interesting is you should have a distinct role. Like you shouldn't let it do all three in one go. Otherwise, you get into vibe coding territory. But yeah, like I love Claude Code in planning mode is like my favorite. That's
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I spend so much time in planning mode. And a lot of times I'll even have it draft markdown files. So it can keep its stuff in memory and keep track of tasks and
Right.
these other things.
Right.
But a lot of times I'm like, hey, let's work on a plan together. And I'll even, it's funny, I actually have we all have these little workflows. I have these like excludes that aren't checked into my code. So it's kind
Yes.
of like a
Yes.
weird hack, but I don't want to muddy up my get ignore. But I'll like push these in, which is like if it has Claude underscore star dot md, I don't want that means that's for me, my personal reference.
Right. Right.
It's something I coded with Claude, and I just don't want it to be committed. But I want it to sit in the repo because it's like a nice reminder, and I can ask it to like look at this thing that we were like working on. And again, it's just kind of like context and reminders and stuff. But I love it as like this like sort of like first draft. Hey, this is what I'm thinking. These are the approaches. Help me understand and weigh the positives and negatives of doing this stuff and complexity and which one can help me iterate. Kind of like these things that I might care about for the business. And I found it very useful to do this context loop where I'm kind of chatting and shaping the form of what my plan is. And even if I don't use it for any other step, like it's a really important security module and I really do need to write the code, or I don't plan on doing it, but I want to give a very clear explanation of what the expectation is for my security engineer, where I say, hey, these are our goals for this project. Security has to be super nailed down. We're going to get this audited. It's really important, blah, blah, blah. I'll use that to help me plan and get a draft of what's there. How do you, what about your thoughts on like first draft versus pair programmer versus validator?
A pair programmer is absolutely what I'm using it the most for.
Oh, cool.
I've
Yeah.
said, oh yeah, Claude Code. We started using it at work a bit, and I was initially a little skeptical because I'm not a big GUI guy, or I'm not a big a terminal guy. I appreciate a GUI. I do use Claude Code in the terminal of Cursor, and so I like that because it just gives you a little bit of like you can highlight a line in Cursor, and Claude Code understands you're talking about it. I do miss with Cursor that Cursor was better about like you could highlight multiple things and like stick them all in the context of the chat, and it would do that. Claude can't do that, which is frustrating. But Claude is very good at that kind of agentic workflow of like it will understand and seek out. And I actually posted this on LinkedIn. It's really cool. Claude will kind of like give you a list of kind of like what it's doing. So like you'll ask about something and it'll be like, okay. And what Claude really excels at is like managing its context. And so it'll do all these tool calls to be like, okay, I'm going to grep the code base for this keyword because you mentioned in the prompt. And then when it kind of finds what you're talking about, then it'll read the entire file there. And now it's got that in its context. And so I posted on LinkedIn. I was like, if you're a junior engineer, don't just peace out when Claude gets to work. Like, look at what it's doing. Look at how it's searching the code base. Like, this is the exact same kind of like debugging and knowledge gathering process you should have when doing this.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I use Claude all the time. I love Claude as a research partner for the code base. Like,
Yes.
I love telling Claude, like, hey, there's some logic in here about canceling subscriptions. Can you find that for me and tell me how it works? And it's like, got it. And my favorite thing ever is doing that and then getting up and like going to get a drink and then coming back. I'm like, hey, look, it did it while I was gone.
Right.
And then, yeah, I write very little code of my own now. But I am pretty darn good about like really, narrowing down the scope of a problem and telling Claude kind of exactly like, okay, this is what we need to do right now. Like take this step and then it'll do it. I'll be like, okay, great. So we've got that done now. Let's go ahead and do that. Again, there's some things I love it for. Like when I just talked about like, sometimes when it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to update this GraphQL query and then I'm gonna have to rebuild the GraphQL, like generated classes. And then after that, I'm gonna have to update the import statements and things like that. Like I love telling Claude, like, you're gonna need to do a bunch of this stuff. You go ahead and take care of it. And like it gets it right most of the time. But then there are other things where it was like, I needed a like the sidebar card of the UI to display a little differently if it was an AI module versus if it was like just another piece of Leland Plus content. And so I kind of asked Claude how to do that. But like the new prompts it gave the sidebar card object were weird. Like they were all kind of muddled together. Like some props, some of the new UI features were generic enough that they should just be generic options for the sidebar card. But then there were some new props that were kind of very AI specific and should only apply if it was an AI a sidebar card for an AI module. But Claude kind of like meshed them all together and kind of assumed that all of this would only ever be present if it was an AI module. So I had to kind of tell it, be like, no, tease it out. Like this prop right here should be available for all sidebar cards. This one is kind of AI module exclusive. And so that just because I've been doing a lot of the work this week, reading this book, and that was one where I was kind of like, yep, like if you were vibe coding, this would eventually become one giant unmaintainable mess. I think it's helpful to have an engineer kind of like tease it out. But
yeah,
I'm probably moving 50% faster. I'm not moving 10 times as fast, I'd say.
Right. The other thing I've noticed too is if there's something that I kind of fall back on and I'm like, there's like a real coding style thing. Like for instance, I really try to avoid classes in TypeScript.
Right.
Not always, but I like to avoid them. I'd rather work in interfaces, and then if we pass around an object that happens to fulfill a bunch of the, function stuff that's in it or whatever. if I keep running into this where it keeps trying to fall back to some other pattern, I'll actually say like, hey, I've given you a lot of feedback over this session. Summarize this feedback into a set of principles in your memory file for this project. And so a lot of times I'll even use it to help me crystallize and refine a set of feedback of like what I expect when there's output that comes from this. And I found that to be really like, that was an aha moment for me where I'm like, okay, we've been pair programming the last like 2 hours on something. And I've really had to kind of like, monitor a junior dev who's very capable, right? Like, and again, this is like, I think of these pair programming sessions as like Ivy League star junior dev, like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, full of knowledge, but maybe misses a lot of the context that we expect in professional software engineers, and maybe doesn't understand forest for the trees. And my goal is to make sure that they're kind of guided in a better way. Sometimes it's literally just better context in the request that I'm giving ad hoc, but sometimes it's really that my Claude.md file or my memory.md file or whatever, or agents.md file or whatever, just needs to have a set of principles updated in it. And so I would say take this feedback loop as something that would be like, especially if you haven't violated your context window and stuff, is to go in and say, if you've had a particularly good session, you built something that you really felt like that you and the large language model had a breakthrough on, getting it to refine that into some 3 bullet points so that it knows how to feed that through context-wise in the future. I found that really useful. And it becomes really productive, especially as I'm like working on a specific code base or a specific set of tasks. Yeah.
But one thing you mentioned, I'm trying to see if I highlighted the quote. Yes, he says, however, remember that prompting well is often a proxy for understanding the problem well. If you find you can't get the AI to do what you want, it might be because you need to clarify your own understanding first. Use that as a signal. And he talks about the importance of validating what AI gives you and using it to constantly learn and to improve your own abilities. And so I'm just kind of looking through my ChatGPT history here. And like I'll often do that. Like sometimes like AI, like Claude will give me like introduce a new concept or use a pattern I'm not familiar with. And then sometimes because I don't want to like kind of interrupt like Claude's workflow and like interject it with new context, sometimes I'll hop over to ChatGPT and start fresh and be like, okay, so we're doing this now. Like, well, what's going on here? And like this is an exact example, but like one thing is like we were working I'm doing a lot of work on this AI module stuff and a lot of UI work, and so the thumbnail for them was kind of like this like pattern gradient thing that our designer came up with. And so he had given me some images, but the problem is those images worked great for like the little like content card on like the browse page, but they weren't big enough. They were blurry for the actual like AI module page. And so our designer was like, actually, like Figma gives us the ability to export these as SVGs instead. And like, I'm like, oh, like
always better.
That's pretty neat. Yeah. And so like, that's pretty neat. But then I realized at that moment, I'm like, I don't know what an SVG is. Like, I know what an SVG is, right? But like, what's actually going on underneath the hood?
I mean, like, it's really just magical XML, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. And so, and I was like, you know what? Let me just hop into ChatGPT for like 5 minutes. And I just had a conversation back and forth. They're like, okay, how does an SVG work? Like, what's going on under the hood? I think you find that, like, if I just search around ChatGPT history for the phrase under the hood, right? Like, I get that a lot. I did that with React the other day where I was just like, or like the JavaScript event loop. I was like, okay, talk to me. What's going on under the hood? And so I just think it's the same advice I give to like students, like when they're doing like, they're applying for internships or like, they're like, how can I really stand out as, with like the projects that I'm making? I'm like, you just have to go about 20% further than you think the average student will go. And so, that's like, okay, so you created like your little, text-based adventure game. Can you get it hosted on AWS? Can you get it using like a real database? Like think about where other students will give up and you push through and do that. And you don't even need to think about where other students would give up. You just have to figure out where you would give up. And right. Wherever you would give up, like just push through that. And I feel that way kind of with AI too, where it's like, just try to go like 20% further. And like, again, like I got this assignment to work with SVGs. I'm like, you know what? I don't know what an SVG. I don't know how that's all working. So
Yeah.
let me
SVGs are
find that out really
amazing.
quick. Oh yeah,
We
yeah.
I was actually working on a project where we'd use them extensively. There are some other restrictions that we have because you can animate SVGs. You can
Oh
actually
yeah.
you can do so much cool stuff. Plus, yes, I mean they're vector graphics at the end of the day, right? And
Mhm.
so what's nice about vector graphics is that they have these like really nice patterns to them, and especially they became especially important to start thinking about when pixel density started to shift. So, when the iPhone and other smartphones started having these really tight pixel densities, because you're basically having like an HD and HD plus resolution on a very small form factor. SVGs are incredibly efficient way of having really crystal clear, crisp graphics that would look good on web browsers on your computer
Mhm.
or inside of your mobile device. Um, he refines this. I think two things feedback I'll give is that, yeah, I think that concept you're talking about is follow through, right? It's not just
Right, right.
do the thing that's asked, but like follow all the way through. Like if you get to this and go, you know what, to really do what you're asking, I actually have to do these 3 extra steps. Putting in that effort to do that goes so far, right? Like any manager, any leader is going to look at this and go, wow, okay, they understood the assignment, to use some Gen Z terminology. And I think it's true. In the book, he actually says, uh, in understanding generated code, he said you need to review, refine, and own. And I think this is the follow through piece. Is like, yes, you can take advantage of these large language model tools, but really understand what's coming out of it. Right? Do not open a PR with no idea what you just made a change on, why it's going to have, what side effects it might have. And the other one is that, like, be transparent. I think he was talking about one law firm in which they're encouraged to use these AI tools, but they must disclose that they
Yeah,
used it
yeah.
for writing or for code. I think that's such an honest way of dealing with this, of just being like, hey, and I'll say this, I'll be like, I was collaborating with Claude on this problem earlier, and this is where I got to. It gives the other person a heads up to make sure that, like, they're code reviewing the proper way, right? Or that they'll really look and make sure that you didn't like leave some M dashes in your writing, where some people get all riled up. If the code if the writing looks a certain way, uh, with good reason, right? The last thing you want to do is write a very important email to somebody and they go, they just generate this whole thing in ChatGPT. Are like, they not
Right,
even
right.
willing to have an honest conversation with me? They're just gonna they're gonna break up with me over ChatGPT, right? Like how
Yeah.
dare you?
It's like that classic comic where, on one end, it's like the guy like, thanks to AI, I can turn this single sentence into a full-fledged email. And the guy receiving is like, thanks to AI, I can turn this wordy email into a single sentence, right? Like,
right,
um,
right. And then it's a
well,
game of telephone because you're like, yeah,
right,
summarize
right.
this thing that this person didn't write, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay,
Well, give me your hot takes, Nathan. What do you, I think we've talked about some of them over the course of the discussion, but anything that really, any
so
scintillating takes?
we focused on the positives. I will say that, like, the very beginning of this book is super topical and will age well, and the middle matters. Like, I think it was like chapter 3, 4, and 5 are really, really good topical stuff. Chapter 2, I think specifically got really into specific tools right now, and I think
Yes, yeah.
it's doomed to have a short shelf life in that regard, because they're like, oh, with VS Code and Copilot, you can do this, and I'm like, oh man, like I wish he had avoided that, because some of this is already wrong. Like, he doesn't even mention Claude Code, for instance, right? Um, uh, there's some stuff where your like agentic terminal stuff is there, but anyway, it's just kind of like, we've seen this already. We've seen this with other books that we've read where we're like,
Right.
oh, that's cute. Like, that was
Yeah.
what we were worried about 20 years ago, wasn't it? Um, Obviously, there's going to have to be a V2 of this book. I think if they just eliminated tool specific stuff. So yeah, doomed to short shelf life. The other one is, no one is a 100x engineer. Like,
Yeah.
and so he actually makes a good case against this, but like, if you think you're going to get into this and become a 100x engineer, you're sorely mistaken. Yeah, like, if you want to turn me off at an interview, or if you want to turn me off in conversations, like, make that claim that somebody's a 100x engineer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I've been reading this, like, you talked kind of a bit about at the beginning, like, about how when AI kind of first came into focus. A lot of the people who are like really like into AI, like you kind of get like that hustler, that grifter vibe. And to be honest, I still think there are way too many hustlers and grifters in this space. I don't like it. I'm just kind of I'm sincere to a fault as a person. I'm not a shock jock. I just like I hate like you see it all over Twitter. Like so much of like Silicon Valley these days is like trying to fund like not necessarily like software engineers, but like creators. Like the big one being like that moron who made the cheating software, right? And the whole idea is that like you get a lot of eyeballs on you because you're doing all this outrageous stuff and selling your soul and your moral convictions for attention, and then you use that attention to build a product. And like I just don't think it's going to work. I really just think that the fundamentals are still there. You still have to build something people want. You still have to, honest, trustworthy, hardworking people are going to be the kind of people you want to do business with in general. It was actually funny with this cheating software. Like people have been reporting on Twitter, like it's down, like it's not working like half the time. Like look at your status page. Your status page says that you have a 50% uptime. Like what's going on? And then he replied, said he's like, oh, okay, that was the wrong status page. We put up the correct status page down. As you can see, we've had 99.9% uptime. It's like, dude, your whole persona, you became famous by willing to cheat and lie to others. Like, why are we supposed to believe you that this is the real status page? We have no idea if your app is working. And so that to me was just kind of like one of like, the house of cards is starting to shake a little because like you need to have trust with your audience and
Right.
you can't build trust by being a liar. Anyhow, and I think there are people kind of in that like hustler and grifter camp who are so excited about AI because like they have chosen to not do the hard work of becoming a software engineer, of understanding problems deeply. And they think this technology has come along that's just allowed them to totally leapfrog people who have done that hard work. And like it's reordered the totem pole. And I just don't think it's true. I just think when all is said and done, the people who are really going to benefit and thrive in this AI age are going to be the people who were going to benefit and thrive in the pre-AI age as well. It's going to be people who understand software deeply, who understand all the technical complexities. He talks a lot about like one of the best things you can do is to understand like the connection points between systems, because like AI is pretty good about understanding a singular code base, but then it starts to struggle with like how are those code bases talking to each other, how is the software orchestrated. I mean, all of DevOps is something that we haven't really cracked yet with AI. And so I just think like there's no shortcut. There's very rarely a shortcut in life, and keep fighting the good fight, keep working hard. Honestly, if you're listening to Book Overflow, I really think that says something about you as an engineer. It says to me that you are the kind of person who is actively trying to further their knowledge. And so
Yeah.
I just think if you're listening to this podcast, you're doing the right thing. Keep on keeping on. I really think people like you and I are going to come out just fine on the other end and, pay the grifters and hustlers no heed.
I one of the interesting things too is so I have my experimentation in the most aggressive vibe coding I've ever done has actually turned kind of I started with vibe coding and now I've really been kind of refining it.
Right.
I built a tool most people don't know this, but I built a tool for Carter and me to coordinate who goes next when asking questions when we're doing interviews, because it's very easy to like talk over each other, especially with latencies
Right.
and things like this. So I wanted a tool there I could just like hit a button and it would just do these coordinating tasks. I call it back channel. The reason I'm bringing this up is that I'm planning on open sourcing this. So
Right.
I'm planning on open sourcing the core tool. And so I've been doing a bunch of reworking and reimagining of it very aggressively using Claude code to help me. And what I'm excited about is like I want to show my workload, my workflow on how I'm building this. I think once I do open source it, I'll probably start building it in public, just as an avenue to experiment with that. And I think hopefully it would be something that other people would find useful, because it's like I built the original prototype in like a weekend and we started using it like 8 months ago, actually. And it's actually come a long way. I've got like a bunch of interesting ideas that I want to do with it, and it'll probably be something where there's a core version that's open source and free to use forever, but there may be some commercial version of it. I'm just playing with ideas. I have no idea if anybody else in podcasting would care about this. But it's just kind of scratching an itch, both from an AI enablement standpoint, but also from like it solves a problem for Book Overflow. And so I think using AI tools to help you solve those kind of deeply personal problems is like an exciting new area that you don't have to be scummy on, right? I
Right.
didn't see a tool like this anywhere. Maybe there is one. I didn't see one, and I wanted to be able to spin something up in a weekend and something that Carter and I could use. And I think those kind of problems that like directly addresses something that you need to do, you don't even know where to get started. The stakes aren't super high because worst case scenario, I ruin me and Carter's day. I mean, that's
Right.
about the end of it. Um, those are good ways to get started, especially to like learn these tools. I would highly recommend just like use the principles in this book, pick a project that's not at work. You know, if you've been kind of really trying to think about something and start experimenting with like, how do I clearly describe stuff? How do I do things? Like, which ways do I use these tools? And am I having fun? That's the other
Mhm.
thing to bring up. So anyway, this book um, has inspired a lot of that. I guess this leads us into what will you do differently in your career as a result of this book?
Yeah, we didn't get into it too much today, but he goes through like a lot of different like prompting patterns. Like this is the
Mm,
one shot versus the zero shot versus the few shot. We are with this AI module like stuff. All of my work has been kind of like building the infrastructure around it. So we really want our operations team to be able to click a button and that spins up a new module. Um, but they have to do the prompt there. And right now we're starting with just one type of module, which is fairly well served by just having kind of like one big system prompt at the beginning. But we are expanding and experimenting with like, okay, well, what about more complicated kind of like workflows? What about yeah, like even in this big system prompt, like what's the best approach? And so I'm going to spend more time kind of using the patterns from this book to understand like, okay, what are our options in terms of like crafting these prompts and what will we see the best results out of it? And we need to look into those evaluative frameworks like brain trust, like you were talking about. What about you?
yeah, for me, I want to spend more time with AI as the validator. I've done plenty of pair programming. I've done plenty of the prototyping. I think it from like a skill set standpoint, using it to validate and having it like I would love to build a custom thing that goes in my CI/CD pipeline that looks for certain types of problems, right? And some of it doesn't necessarily have to be something I build per se, but this is where like CodeRabbit and some of these other tools are in, where you're like, hey, you know, validate these ideas or validate these patterns or look for stuff that so anyway I have some like little personal stuff that I'm gonna play with, you know. I feel like that's the weakest area as far as like how I'm using it to kind of help me write better code.
Yeah, well, I'm excited, and we're excited to finish out the book. I guess we should talk about who we would recommend it to. Um, yeah, Nathan, what do you got?
Yeah, so again, I love books that actually declare who they
Right.
think the audience is, and so I'm going to piggyback off this because I think they nailed it. I think you're right. Probably the editors forced them to like start from like square one for some
Right.
reason, which is in juxtaposition to this. But his declared three audiences are experienced engineers, product focused engineers, and engineering leadership, right? And the book elaborates on this, but I think we're in that. I think Carter and I probably are in the range of like experienced engineers and product focused engineers. I think
Right.
maybe
Right.
Carter's a little more product focused than I am. But I appreciate product focused engineers. I really do. And then engineering leadership, right? Like this book would be really valuable if you're the CTO of a company and you're like, how should I encourage AI tool utilization to maximize engineering happiness or to maximize velocity, right? Like this is exactly the way you need to think about it as a leader so that you can have a vocabulary to come in and say, hey, I see you're struggling in this area. I read this book and we should try this prompting framework to get better outputs, right? Like
Right.
if my CTO came to me with that, I'd be like, coolest CTO ever.
Yeah.
This is great.
And I'd agree with you on that the focus of experienced engineers, product focused engineers, and engineering leadership. There is like one little section, I think in like chapter 4, targeted explicitly towards juniors and kind of like, hey, here's
Mm-hmm.
how you can thrive in like the AI world. I'm like, oh, this is really neat. And I also will say, I think chapter 4, he says like, okay, so most of this came from like an essay I wrote. And so I might try to find and link just that essay in particular because I found that chapter to be the strongest one. Um, but I just say to junior engineers, like I think you kind of get two things out of this book, which like one, sometimes it's fun to kind of like eavesdrop on the conversations that are happening between senior engineers. Like reading a book like this is kind of one way to do that. And two, I think if you're a junior engineer or student and you're really nervous about like the future and that AI is going to come eat your job and there's no hope for you, like reading this book is really comforting. And you can see like this is a senior engineering leader at Google who has been able to create an entire book about like, here is how AI fits into an experienced engineer's workflows. And like, yeah, and just like, yeah, again, we don't need to be as doom and gloom as some people have been. There's a lot of hope here, and it's a very exciting time in the industry. So we're
Yeah.
excited to keep reading this book. We've got we'll finish it out next week, and yeah, then we'll go from there. So you can always, again, if you're a super fan, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, please write us at contact@bookoverflow.io. We'd love to hear from you, talk to you about maybe coming on the podcast as kind of a special role for one of our end of the year episodes. I'm on Twitter at Carter Morgan. We're on Twitter at Book Overflow Pod. Nathan's work with Functionally Imperative is at functionallyimperative.com. And we will see you next week, folks. Thanks for listening.